Hey, this is Zulem Urbina, and tune into the relay for the latest news in boxing all around the world. Thank you for supporting myself and other female boxers. We truly appreciate it.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Middleweight contender Carlos Adames says, not just Munguia, Charlo, the entire middleweight division is avoiding me. The Dominican contender legitimized himself as one of the sport's top middleweights when he outpointed Sergey Derevyanchenko in their 10-rounder last December 5th at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Defeating Derevyanchenko by majority decision only made him a higher-risk, low-reward proposition, according to Adames. I feel like it's not just Jaime Munguia, not just Charlo, but the entire 160-pound division is avoiding me, to where it's kind of like all the top contenders in the division, Adames told BoxingScene.com through a translator, they're not really wanting to face me. There's nothing I can really do about that. I can only face what's in front of me, and right now, that person is Juan Macias Montiel. So I'm gonna take on that fight ahead of me. I can't worry about what others may and may not do.
Carlos Adames is ranked number 1 by way of the WBC.
Regardless, Adames doesn't expect Charlo to fight him, even if Adames becomes the WBC's interim middleweight champion. I believe that he would try to avoid me because he had the chance to face me before, with not so much on the line, Adames said. And now, with everything that would be on the line, I don't think he would be able to take that kind of pressure, and he would try to sidestep it however he can. I would love to face him. In his case, I don't think he would be up to the challenge. The 32-year-old Charlo hasn't fought since his tougher-than-anticipated title defense against Juan Macias Montiel in June of last year at the Toyota Center in Houston. Charlo was supposed to face Sulietzky this past June at the Toyota Center,
But reports indicated he hurt his back, so he had to pull out. He hasn't fought at all this year.
there was a before and an after for me. Before the fight with Sergey Derevyanchenko and afterwards, Adames said. Because before I fought Derevyanchenko, I didn't have the kind of team that I have around me now. I didn't have the kind of preparation that I have now. And I didn't have the tools that I have now. And then that win put the middleweight division on notice. Everyone saw what I was capable of. And now that I am able to prepare in even better fashion, that just says that I'm not even close to my ceiling. When it comes to that win against Sergey Derevyanchenko, the best is yet to come.
Carlos Adames has one lone defeat on his record. His lone defeat came at the hands of Brazil's own Patrick Teixeira.
It was 3 years ago. He has since rebounded. He sat out all of 2020 and he fought 3 times last year. He had a very busy 2021, a small show over there in his native Dominican Republic, and he fought on 2 PBC shows, 2 PBC cards to cap off the year.
He sounds frustrated.
I can't say I blame him. He sat atop the WBC's middleweight rank standings for some time now, but he doesn't seem close to a world title shot, a world title opportunity. He claims that Jamal is avoiding him at a time when Jamal is supposed to be out injured with a back injury, the back injury that postponed the Sulietzky fight. Will Charlo face Carlos Adames upon his return, whenever that is?
Thinks Charlo's avoiding him.
Well, Jamal is supposed to fight Macias Sulietzky, and that was a voluntary title defense, not a mandatory title defense, you understand. So Jamal actually had the option of facing Carlos straight away without the WBC ordering him to do so, and he chose Sulietzky instead.
Probably why Carlos feels that Jamal's avoiding him. He mentioned Jaime Munguia also.
Jaime Munguia, who's ranked right behind Carlos in the WBC's rank standings at number 2. And Carlos Adames, I don't think he's on Jaime's radar.
Jaime's last fight was above middleweight, the Jimmy Kelly fight.
Moreover, Showtime made a conscious effort to try to bring Jaime Munguia over for a Jermall Charlo fight. Needless to say, that didn't work out. That fight didn't materialize. So if they couldn't secure Jaime for Jermall, what chance does Carlos Adames have of securing a Jaime Munguia fight?
You ain't got nothing Jaime Munguia wants. You ain't got nothing Jaime Munguia needs. And short of the WBC ordering it,
And the problem there is that Jaime is with a different promoter fighting on a completely different platform.
so I don't get the sense that Carlos Adames is on his radar. For what it's worth, I'd actually pick Jaime Munguia to stop Carlos Adames.
I would. Carlos is a good boxer, but I don't get the sense he takes the best punch and he doesn't have the best gas tank. Looks like a guy who fades down the stretch, and I think Jaime stands a good chance of knocking the guy out if they were to share the ring, though Carlos is frustrated because he wants that fight. He wants that opportunity, and he doesn't seem to be on Jaime's radar. He feels that Jamal and Jaime are avoiding him. Ranked behind them is the United Kingdom's own Chris Eubank Jr., and we all know who he's set to fight in the very near future, an unbeaten welterweight in the form of Conor Benn.
I'm telling you, today's middleweight division sucks. Nobody wants to fight nobody.
Nobody. Chris Eubank Jr., one of the more familiar faces in this division, he's set to fight a welterweight. Gennady Golovkin, he was just in action up there at super middleweight. Who knows when he's coming back?
Who knows when Jamal is coming back? This division's WBC champion and Carlos's PBC stablemate.
A terrible business that both Carlos Adames and Jamal Charlo are on the same side of the street politically, yet Carlos cannot secure a fight with him.
So Carlos is stuck fighting Jamal's sloppy seconds in the form of Juan Macias Montiel.
That sucks.
Early next month on the undercard of Fundoria versus Ocampo.
I understand Carlos's frustration, though. Given the side of the street that he's on, he only has access to but so many fighters.
Jaime Munguia is not one of them. Neither is Chris Eubank Jr. By all rights, he should be in the right place for a Charlo fight, but Charlo is out injured. Quote-unquote injured.
This might end up being Carlos Adames' only fight this year.
Do you remember what I told you in my previous video? PBC fighters, sparse schedules of activity, careers that wither and die on the vine.
Where it's at.
I'd like to tell you there's a silver lining to all of this, but
nothing else need be said.
Sitcom, all of them sitcoms.
Floyd, why you smiling? Why you smiling, Floyd? Because when you heard Al's name, you smiled, champ.
And that contract was whack.
Yeah.
It is what it is. The business is the paperwork.
Okay.
How whack? What does whack mean? Like what? It was like, open-ended on the fights? Because it seemed like PBC fighters don't get to fight when they supposed to or want to. So was it that? Like they couldn't guarantee you dates? What was whack? Was the money whack? What was whack?
The thing that's whack is the control.
I've long maintained that PBC fighters, unlike some other fighters that are with some other outfits, they don't seem to have the same autonomy.
Same autonomy other fighters have.
Most fighters don't realize they are independent contractors.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so if you're 1099, for somebody to come take all your control where they can own your name.
Pay attention to what Floyd Scofield's dad is saying, because we are talking about a PBC contract, PBC situation that they decided to walk away from on the premise of what was in the contract.
They can own all that at the end of your thing, and then they have first dibs once the contract ends. You can't go to somebody else. You got to allow them to sit there and say, no, we're going to match this and do.
Sounds a lot like what Floyd Scofield's father's saying is that even if a contract reaches its term limit, the PBC still maintains a certain level of control over the fighter.
Beyond the life of the contract, that the fighter has almost no autonomy.
They can't leave.
What the hell kind of screwball contract is that?
Contract reaches its term limit, so you can't shop yourself around to a different outfit for what is perhaps a better offer and terms that are more to your liking. You can't leave.
I've often wondered about what's in those PBC contracts for those fighters.
No, that's too much control. We our own brand, our own company. So we gotta get in a contract where it's mutually okay. And they wasn't willing to negotiate a mutually okay contract.
Sounds a lot like the Scofields knew better than to walk into a situation where they have no decision-making powers of their own.
You wonder why standout amateurs and blue-chip prospects like Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney didn't end up going to the PBC.
The more recent cycle of Olympic amateur standouts, them as well, they didn't go there either.
Why would they? It's a shitty fucking situation. Shitty contract.
We're not going to give up our intellectual property, our image, our name.
Your intellectual property, your image, your likeness. This could be, your ability to make money from a video game that you're featured in, a residual form of revenue. What could be a residual form of revenue for a fighter?
What, the PBC owns that?
Well, that's what Mr. Schofield is describing.
They no guarantee on how many fights we're going to get just whenever you decide to give us a
No guarantee.
This would explain sparse schedules of activity like what we see in Carlos Adames, who should have at least fought at least once this year by now, and he's just now getting out there towards the tail end of the year. This would explain Adrian Broner's constant gripe.
I'm going to be 100% honest with you, Brian. I ain't with none of this shit they got going on. I feel like Al Heyman and Steven Espinoza is bullshitting. Y'all, at this point, y'all bullshitting. Y'all's been supposed to make this fight. Y'all giving us dates. Y'all keep pushing our dates back. Like, y'all, come on, man. Who the fuck do a 6-month camp?
Do you remember what he said about fight dates constantly getting pushed back?
Because the PBC doesn't seem to guarantee any particular number of fights throughout the life of the contract. They are under no obligation to keep a fighter busy, keep a fighter active.
And all the while they may own your image, own your likeness, your name.
What the hell are you getting in return?
This is why they ditched that situation and decided to go to Golden Boy.
No, it's no guarantee.
It sounds a lot like the PBC structured a contract where they can keep their thumb on the fighter. They have almost no autonomy, and they get very little in return. Very little in terms of guarantees and assurances that should they sign over these liberties,
they're compensated for it in some way. That, okay, you'll get exclusivity, but what the hell do we get in return?
Floyd Scofield, an unbeaten up-and-comer who sports a professional record of 11 wins, no losses, no draws, 9 knockouts, campaigning in the lightweight division. Lightweight, that's 135 pounds. Him and his team, they made a decision that they wanted to jump into bed with Golden Boy as opposed to the PBC. And I think it's saying a lot because Golden Boy,
they really ain't got the run of the place at lightweight. And most of the familiar lightweights, they don't fight there.
They're either fighting under the top rank banner or the PBC banner. You know, your Vasyl Lomachenko, your Devin Haney, all of them, your Gervonta Davis, your Rolly Romero, your Isaac Cruz, you know, all of them. And the Scofields made an interesting decision that could end up paying off in the end because they want to maintain a certain level of autonomy. If you think about the Golden Boy situation as a temporary situation for Floyd Scofield. If you think about that situation as a temporary situation geared towards accommodating what he needs right now in his career as a young fighter, just 20 years old, unbeaten, doesn't even have 20 fights yet. If you think about that as being temporary, a situation where they have some wiggle room, some liberty, and, you know, as their situation changes,
so might the decorum, because they have the liberty to change their decorum.
Because it's so early in young Floyd Scofield's career, maybe he just needs a couple of fights for right now and a platform to air them. That's all he needs.
Kind of like what we saw between Sinicia Estrada and Golden Boy Promotions and how she eventually migrated over to Top Rank for more money.
You know, PBC had a Mongolian prospect that goes by the name King Tug. And King Tug, you know, he had one fight, January of 2019, sat out the rest of the year. Didn't fight again the entire year. At this time,
he was an unbeaten up-and-comer, an unbeaten prospect. He only had 10 fights.
Fights once the whole year. Once in January. At the top of the year, they don't get that guy back out there. They don't get him back out there again. And based on what Mr. Scofield said, they're under no obligation to get him back out there because they don't guarantee you any particular number of fights in the contract. The next time we saw King Tug, it was over a year later in the Gary Russell Jr. fight, a world title fight. So you put this unbeaten prospect in a world title fight when he's been sitting on the shelf for over a year?
You're just setting him up to fail.
You've often heard me say here on the channel that the PBC don't know how to groom talent and develop fighters, and that's just one example.
Carlos Adames sitting up most of this year is yet another.
In light of these recent comments from the Scofields, I feel like young Floyd dodged a bullet. And this news is coming to us at a time when Adrian Broner is currently campaigning for a Nate Diaz MMA boxing crossover fight. Nate Diaz now being a free agent, able to go where he wants to go and do what he wants to do. They actually could make a lot of money with this thing if they could get it over the line, though you must question as to whether or not Adrian Broner himself has the autonomy to make a fight like this happen. You know, without Al Heyman and everybody else.
Well, what happened to his mental health stuff?
I told you what I think. I think all of that was just a lot of bullshit. Earlier this year, Adrian was having talks, preliminary talks, about a potential Conor Benn fight, a potential Montana Love fight. Eddie Hearn offered him $2 million for Montana Love and a little over $2 million for Conor Benn. He didn't take him up on that deal. He ended up going into an Omar Figueroa fight instead. Omar Figueroa, we pulled out on Omar, so he ended up making nothing. Nada. Zippo. Adrian Broner didn't make anything.
Nate Diaz has been saying that he means to cross over into boxing now that he's a free agent.
There's a wealth of opportunity there for Nate Diaz as a free agent to do crossover fights that could yield a big return. But I'm not convinced that Adrian Broner here today has the same autonomy that Nate Diaz has. I'm not sure that Adrian Broner is at liberty to do business on his own behalf. Adrian Broner, who more than once has expressed discontent at his current situation, whatever that situation is.
I told you, I don't think he pulled out of the Figueroa fight because of quote-unquote mental health issues, even if he really has them.
Even if he really has psychological problems and mental health issues, that's not the reason I think he pulled out of that fight. I think he saw what he stood to make boxing Omar Figueroa. I think he saw that it's not on par with what Eddie Hearn offered him, $2 million for Montana Love and $2.5 million for Conor Benn. You're not going to convince me that they were going to pay this guy.
They were not going to pay this guy $2 million to box Omar Figueroa, today's Omar Figueroa, or in excess of $2 million. No way.
Since having pulled out of that fight due to what he described as mental health issues, has he seen a mental health professional? Because what he essentially did was call out sick from work. Him being a pugilist, a fighter by trade, can he provide documentation that since that time he has seen a mental health professional?
What are you saying? You're mentally ill. You're too mentally ill to box Omar Figueroa, but you're not too mentally ill to box Nate Diaz.
Showtime might decide to get behind this, you know. Showtime decided to get balls deep in the Jake Paul business. They stage his fights. This ain't too far from that.
They ain't too good to do a Broner versus Nate Diaz crossover fight. If Nate Diaz wants to, I think they're receptive.
I feel like the ball really is in Nate Diaz's court as to whether or not he wants to explore this idea and how far he wants to go with it. Is he serious? Does he really mean to cross over into boxing? Because if he is serious, there's money on the table for him.
Chris Cyborg made her boxing debut this past weekend.
You think about all the issues that the PBC and Showtime are facing, the issues they're facing jointly, issues with what's supposed to be the Crawford versus Spence fight, whether or not Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Davis is really set to go down later on this year in December. You think about that, the kind of metrics they've been putting up, the paper-thin fight schedule they've got.
I don't think Adrian himself has the autonomy to do this independently, but with Showtime behind him, he might be able to do it.
If Showtime bankrolls it, I think he'd be the B-side to Nate Diaz. I want to say that. Adrian Broner here today don't have the buzz that he used to have in previous years, whereas Nate Diaz, he's coming off a big win, and he still has a lot of fans.
He's coming off a big win in the Octomom.
The Octagon.
Megatron.
No, I don't think that Adrian has the autonomy to negotiate the situation himself independently, but Showtime might help him along the way. Showtime might get behind something like this. It all depends on how interested Nate Diaz is. Is he serious? If they can get Nate on board, this could do very well at the box office.
Just something to think about.